Single dad gives a ride to a lost woman, and she is the millionaire heiress neighbor. That is exactly what the story is about. A single dad, a lost woman on a dirt road, and a secret that would change everything between them. Marco was 42 years old, and he had been living in the same small town in Texas his whole life. A Mexican-American man, born and raised in a place where everybody knew your name, your truck, and your mama's tamale recipe. He worked as a mechanic at a small shop on the edge of town, fixing old engines and charging fair prices, because that was how his father taught him to do things. Every afternoon, Marco picked up his 7-year-old son, Diego, from a neighbor's house after school. It was their routine. A simple life, a quiet life, a life that made sense. But on one Thursday afternoon in late summer, something broke that routine wide open. The sun was still heavy in the sky when Marco saw her. A woman walking alone on the dirt road outside of town. She had a backpack on her shoulders, sweat running down her neck, and the look of someone who had already given everything she had just to keep moving forward. Marco slowed down his old truck. He looked at her. She looked at him, and without thinking too hard about it, he rolled down the window and asked the question that would start everything. "Hey, do you need a ride?" The woman turned slowly. Her eyes were tired, red from the heat, and a little scared. The kind of scare that comes not from danger but from exhaustion. "Yes, please," she said. Her voice came out rough, like she hadn't had water in a while. Marco pushed the door open from the inside. "Get in. It's not safe out here in this heat. I'm Marco. I'm a mechanic around here." She climbed in and let out a long, slow breath the moment the shadow of the cab hit her face. "I'm Sophia," she said. "Thank you for stopping." She was around 38 years old. Her clothes were plain, a loose shirt, worn jeans, old sneakers. She carried nothing that said money, nothing that said anything except tired woman trying to keep going. Marco drove without pushing. He asked simple questions the way people from small towns do. Not to be nosy, but because silence feels rude. "You from around here?" "No," she said. "I'm just looking around, thinking about a change. A big change." Marco asked. "The biggest?" she said quietly. She looked out the window at the dry fields, the little houses, the stray dog sleeping under a mesquite tree. Something in her face softened, like she was seeing something she had been missing for a long time and didn't even know it. Marco pointed out a few things as they drove. The woman who made the best pan dulce in the county. The old man who still fixed fences at 80 years old. The kids playing in the street without looking at their phones. Sophia watched all of it like it was a movie she wanted to live inside. When they reached the center town, Marco asked where she was staying. "The little motel on Main Street," Sophia said. "Someone at the gas station told me it was clean and cheap." "Donna Lupe's place," Marco said with a smile. "Yeah, it's clean. She'll probably feed you breakfast without even asking." Sophia laughed, a small, quick laugh, the kind that escapes before a person can catch it. "Tomorrow morning," Marco said as she opened the door, "if you want, I'll take you to Senora Rosa's cafe. That's where everybody meets. Best coffee and the best gossip in town." Sophia stepped out and looked back at him with a smile that was slow and honest. "Okay, tomorrow morning." She stood there for a second after the truck pulled away, one hand on the strap of her backpack. The feeling in her chest was strange and warm, like she had just met someone real after a very long time of meeting people who were only performing. What Marco did not know, what nobody in that town knew, was that the old abandoned mansion on the hill right next to the small house had just been purchased, in secret, through lawyers and shell companies and careful signatures, by Sophia. She was not just a tired woman on a dirt road. She was the heiress to one of the largest family fortunes in the state. And she had come to this little Texas town not to show off, not to be seen, but to disappear. And maybe, for the first time in her life, to be known as just a person. The next morning, Marco showed up on time, just like he said he would. Sophia came down the stairs of the motel in simple clothes again, hair pulled back, no jewelry, nothing that gave anything away. At Senora Rosa's cafe, she saw something she was not used to seeing. Marco walked in, and the whole room seemed to light up around him. He knew every name. He asked about kids, about bad knees, about the old truck that needed a new belt. He helped a woman carry a heavy box to her car without anyone asking him to. He was liked, not the way people like someone because of what they have, but the way people like someone because of who they are. Sophia sat across from him with her coffee and asked quietly, "Did you always live here?" "Born here, grew up here, learned to fix engines right here," Marco said. "Never really thought about leaving. Everything I need is here." Sophia looked down at her cup. That must be a good feeling, knowing where you belong. Marco studied her face for a second. "You looking for that?" "Something like that," she said. Later that morning, he offered to show her around, really around, not just the main street, but the real town. They drove up a hill where you could see everything. The mechanic shop, the bakery smoke, the schoolyard, the whole small life of the place laid out like a map. And from that hill, Marco pointed to a big old house far away on the ridge. "See that? The old Montoya mansion. Abandoned for years. Word is somebody just bought it." Sophia looked at it too long, and Marco noticed. "You're really thinking about moving here?" Marco asked, watching her stare at the old mansion. Sophia pulled her eyes away and looked at her hands. "I'm looking at a few places. This is the second one. I need to feel if it's right." "Well," Marco said with a simple smile, "if you need someone to show you the good corners of this town, you can count on me." Sophia felt warmth move through her that had nothing to do with the Texas sun, because she knew, and this was the part that scared her, that if she stayed, the secret of the mansion and the money would not stay hidden for long. Over the next few days, Sophia became part of the town's rhythm, without even planning it. She helped Senora Rosa arrange tables in the morning. She sat with old Don Ernesto in the afternoon and listened to his stories. And by the end of each day, she always ended up crossing paths with Marco, at the shop, at the market, walking the same streets. The strange part was this. She wasn't always performing. There was a piece of her, maybe the truest piece, that genuinely loved washing dishes, talking without hurry, feeling like nobody there wanted anything from her except simple respect. But behind every smile, the same question kept hammering inside her chest. What happens when they find out who I really am? Marco, in his own way, had started to care too, not just as someone who liked to help people, but as a man who saw someone trying to start over and wanted to protect that without smothering it. One afternoon, walking back from the market, Marco said something small that carried a lot of weight. "People here like you. You fit." Sophia smiled, and the smile almost turned into tears. "Sometimes I'm afraid that if people really knew me, everything would change." Marco stopped walking right there in the middle of the street. He looked at her with calm, steady eyes and said the simplest and most dangerous sentence a person full of secrets can hear. "Everybody has a past. What matters is who you choose to be today." That night, Sophia could not sleep. The town was quiet, just crickets and wind, and that quiet felt like peace to most people. But to her, the silence made the noise inside her louder. Because while during the day she was just Sophia from the motel, at night she became someone else. She made careful calls. She sent emails from a second phone. She signed documents without leaving a clear trail. The purchase of the mansion was moving forward. Lawyers in the city were handling everything through a company with a name that meant nothing. Her name appeared nowhere. She had one standing order. Complete description, nothing with my name. And every step of that process made her chest heavier, because her heart had already started choosing a side. Then came the moment that pressed hardest of all. At the shop one afternoon, Marco talked about an old dream, not asking for anything, just saying out loud, "I always wanted to expand this place, not to get rich, just to teach young people. Mechanics, electrical, woodworking, something so the kids here don't have to leave town to have a future." Marco laughed a short laugh, the kind a man makes when he has learned not to want too much. But dreams cost money, and here we barely break even. Sophia stayed quiet for 2 long seconds. She was holding back the urge to say, "I can fix that right now," but if she fixed it, she would give everything away. So she only answered carefully, "That's a beautiful dream, Marco." And inside she decided, when the mansion is in my name officially, I will find a way to help without it looking like charity. As the weeks passed, the connection between them became clearer in all the things that were not said. A quick touch on the arm that lasted 1 second too long. A look that came back. A comfortable silence on the hill, watching the small town below. And the more real it felt, the more Sophia was afraid, because she knew no love can survive forever on the promise of, I'll tell you later. But she also knew what it felt like to have a lot of money and never be sure if someone loved you or what you represented. Marco was the first person in a very long time who did not ask where she really came from, did not calculate, did not evaluate. He was just there. And that was exactly why she was about to discover. A secret, when it grows, does not stay hidden. It explodes. The news started as a whisper at the corner store. By the time Sophia noticed, it was the loudest topic in town. The old mansion on the hill had been sold. Nobody knew to whom. Regular people don't buy a mansion that size, grumbled old Don Ernesto, stirring his coffee like the spoon owed him an answer. Marco heard everything and said what only someone with hope left in his chest would say. I hope whoever bought it does something good. That place just sitting there is a waste. Sophia swallowed hard, kept her face still, and answered low and careful. Who knows? Maybe they just want some privacy. Inside, her heart hammered like it wanted to confess on its own. From that day on, Sophia was living with double weight. In the morning, she was the same simple woman who smiled at everyone, carried bags of flour, cleaned tables, and listened to stories in the plaza. But at night, locked in her motel room, she became someone else, fast, precise, cold about what needed to be cold. She coordinated the renovation by phone, approved budgets, signed digital documents, demanded silence from everyone involved. She had one instruction she repeated like a prayer. Nobody saw me. Nobody knows my name. Any questions? You don't know the owner. It was the only way to keep the mask of her fresh start alive, while also building what she had actually come to build. Not to play at being poor, but to change her life, to create something real. A home, a project, a proof. And meanwhile, Marco and Sophia were no longer just a hidden friendship. They tried to act normal, but normal was slipping through their eyes every time they looked at each other. One night on the hill, the town glowing below them, Marco went quiet too long. Sophia felt the silence turn into something coming. Sophia, he began, picking his words carefully, like a man stepping on glass. You became important to me faster than I expected. She felt her chest close in. It was exactly what she wanted to hear and exactly what she feared. Marco. He breathed deep and let it out all at once. Simple. True. I fell in love with you. Sophia answered with a voice trembling from honesty. I did too. And for one moment, everything felt perfect, until fear remembered itself. Their love was growing on top of a secret. 3 days later, life reminded them that secrets don't wait for good weather. The storm came for real, violent, the kind the town hadn't seen in years. Wind ripping shingles off roofs. Rain turned the streets to mud. People shouting neighbors' names out of windows. Marco showed up at the motel soaked, desperate, with the face of a man watching his past about to drown. My house. The roof opened up. Sophia didn't think for 1 second. She went with him. They worked like two soldiers. Pulled tarps, lifted furniture, carried buckets, pushed water with mops across the floor. And when Marco said he needed to climb onto the roof, Sophia grabbed his arm of fear, but did not let go. I'm going with you. It wasn't movie courage. It was a human kind. The kind that belongs to someone who has decided not to leave a person alone in their worst moment. When the storm finally gave up, Marco's house was damaged but standing. Neighbors had helped, because that was how things worked there. One person falls. The others hold him up. Marco held Sophia tight, and in that embrace, she felt the promise she wanted to make was too big to fit inside a sentence. But in the middle of all that chaos, Sophia's second phone vibrated. It was the foreman from the mansion. Ma'am, the mansion took damage too. Part of the roof caved again. You need to come see it. Urgent. Sophia's stomach dropped. How was she supposed to go up that hill now? The whole town was awake. People were in the streets. Everybody was watching everything. She scheduled it for before sunrise, before the town woke up, hoping nobody would see her. That was exactly what brought the house of cards down. Still dark outside. Sophia slipped out quietly, climbed the hill fast, stepped into the gardens of the mansion, and started talking to Foreman the way someone talks when they're used to being in charge, pointing out what needed to be fixed, approving extra costs, setting deadlines. She was so focused she did not notice the figure near the lake below. Marco had gone out early to breathe, to think after the terrible night, and from where he stood, he could see everything clearly. Sophia, standing straight, giving orders, like she owned the place, because she did. For a moment, he thought it was a trick of the early light. In the next moment, the truth began forming in his eyes, and that was not a small detail. That was a missing piece that changed the whole picture. Marco spent the rest of that morning with his body at the cafe and his mind on that hill. Sophia appeared at their usual table with the same careful smile, the same gentle way about her. But now every move she made had a different echo behind it. He tried to act normal. He tried. But the question burned in his throat until it became something he had to say. "You went out early today," he said in a tone too casual to be casual. Sophia went cold inside but answered fast, turning the words sideways. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep after the storm. Went for a walk." Marco stirred his coffee like he was just curious, but his eyes weren't playing. "Walk where?" "Around. The streets." He nodded slowly without pushing, and the silence between them started to grow. Heavy, the kind that doesn't disappear on its own. In the days that followed, while the town recovered from the storm, Sophia and Marco worked side by side on his house. But something had changed. He was still polite, still grateful, still accepting her help. Only there was an invisible wall between them now, like he had placed a sheet of glass where warmth used to be. And the more Sophia tried to seem the same as always, the more small things gave her away. She knew exactly which materials to buy. She talked about structure and budgets the way someone talks when they have done it before. The kind of care she took with details did not match someone who claimed to be lost and starting over. Marco observed all of it without accusing, but each observation was another brick in his certainty. On the fourth night after the storm, they were sitting on his porch, exhausted, listening to crickets and smelling wet wood. The silence was no longer comfortable. It was a demand. Marco finally released what he had been holding. "Sophia, who are you really?" She tried to laugh, but the sound came out wrong. "What do you mean?" He didn't raise his voice. That hurt more than shouting would have. "Don't pretend you don't understand. There are things that don't fit. And now I saw you. Sophia, I saw you at the mansion early this morning, talking to the foreman like you owned the place." Her world came apart right there. Not slowly, all at once, like months of effort turning to dust in seconds. "I can explain." Marco crossed his arms slowly, trying to hold himself together. "Then explain. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you lied to me from the first day." She shook her head, desperate. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell everything." The words came out and were already weak, because she knew it herself. That was almost the same thing. Marco breathed in deep, the hurt rising in his face. "To me, it's the same. You built something with me, and I don't know what was real anymore." Sophia stepped closer, careful, afraid one wrong move would end everything. "Marco, I didn't hide out of cruelty. I needed to find out if someone could like me without looking at what I have." He laughed, not with humor, only sadness. "And you decided that about me before I gave you any reason to. You treated me like I was the same as everybody else who hurt you, before giving me the chance to be different." Sophia choked on her own tears, because he was right. She reached for his arm, but he stepped back, not aggressive, wounded. "Do you understand what it feels like to trust someone, and then find out that person chose to keep the truth from you?" Sophia whispered, "But what we lived, was that real?" Marco answered low, his voice cracking at the edges. "It might have been real for you, but it was built on something left out. And I don't know how to trust that." He stood up like a man who needs air before he says something he can't take back. "I need to think. I need to understand who you are and what I am in this story. Marco, please." He stopped for 1 second without turning all the way around. "I'm not saying it's over. I'm saying I don't know where I'm standing anymore." And he left. He left Sophia sitting there alone on the porch, with the sound of crickets that seemed to mock the silence she was drowning in. In that moment, she understood something no amount of money ever teaches you. You can have everything and still not be able to buy trust. And the worst fear she had carried, that the truth would ruin everything, had come true. Not in spite of her trying to protect things, but because of it. Sophia spent that night staring at the ceiling fan in her motel room. In the morning, when she came down to Senora Rosa's cafe, she felt the temperature of the town had changed around her. Not the heat of the sun, the heat of eyes. Whispers came in pieces, like small stones thrown from a distance. She's rich, they say. So, why was she here acting like regular people? Clara tried to keep going like normal. She helped wash cups. She smiled at a child running in the doorway. But she could feel herself being measured by a ruler she had built herself, by hiding the truth. And it hurt because up until now this town was the first place in years where she felt like just Sophia. Now nobody seemed to know where to put her. Marco, on his side, had become a divided man. During the day, he did what needed doing. Fix the roof, straighten the fence, care for Diego, his 7-year-old, who depended on him for everything. And it was exactly that which made everything harder. Diego asked about Sophia like it was obvious she was part of their life now. Is she coming today, Dad? And Marco would answer, we'll see, which sounded simple but carried a whole earthquake inside it. He wanted to believe in the woman who had carried buckets of water in the storm without complaining, who played in the plaza without putting on airs, who listened to an old man's stories like they were the most important thing in the world. But the image of her at the mansion, straight-backed, giving orders, all authority, kept hitting the other image, and his mind would not stop repeating. If she hid this, what else did she hide? As if life didn't know how to go slow, the truth started finding its stage. The mansion story became the official topic of the whole town. Everyone had a theory. Cars going up the hill before sunrise. Lawyers from the city. A woman nobody had seen. Regular people don't do business like that, someone said. And hanging inside every conversation was a judgment that was not just about money. It was about intention. She came here to play at being simple. She fooled everybody. She fooled Marco. Each sentence landed like a small rock because there was a corner of guilt she could not argue away. She had not pretended her feelings, but she had hidden the whole frame of her life. Then the past arrived in the form of dark windows and quiet engines. 3 expensive cars pulled into the plaza. Men in pressed clothes stepped out like they were walking into an event, not a small town with a dirt parking lot. They asked for her without embarrassment, loud, certain, like they owned the air around them. Sophia recognized one of them immediately. David, someone from her old world. The kind who always showed up with a trained smile and a hidden agenda. Sophia, your family is worried. This has gone past the point of acceptable. She tried to hold her posture, but the whole town was watching. I didn't disappear. I chose to be here. Another man laughed with light contempt, looking around like he was disappointed by the air itself. You're an heiress. People are talking. Your father sent us. The word heiress spread to the crowd like fire. Sophia felt her face burn, not from shame at having money, but because now everything seemed to confirm the worst version of her story that people were painting. That night, Marco's mother, a woman who protected with directness, the kind of love that comes out tough because it has to, pulled her son into the kitchen. Raphael, you need to open your eyes. He didn't argue. He just stood there, tired, one hand on the table. Son, she said, that woman bought the mansion and never told you. She lived here for months as one person, and then strangers in suits showed up calling her an heiress. You have a son to raise. A real life. You can't step into a game you don't understand. Marco tried to defend Sophia, but the words came out soft. She didn't seem fake. His mother looked at him with both pity and firmness at once. That's exactly what worries me, because she might be good, but her world and ours are not the same, and you're already hurting just from imagining. Marco went quiet, because the deepest pain was exactly that. He didn't know anymore if he missed her, or if he missed a version of her she had let him see. Sophia tried to find a moment to talk to Marco that week, but the town kept placing people between them. A neighbor would start a conversation. Senora Rosa would call for help. Someone would stop Marco on the street to talk about the whole situation, as if their lives had become public entertainment. And the louder the noise got, the more Sophia understood the size of what she had broken. It wasn't just about money. It was a feeling that she had come in wearing a mask, even if the fear behind that mask was real. She began to feel, underneath her skin, that strange loneliness of belonging nowhere. Too rich to be regular people without suspicion. Too regular, in the way she actually wanted to live. To go back to the world of the wealthy without feeling sick about it. One afternoon, she climbed the hill alone, to the spot where Marco always went to breathe when the world pressed too hard. He was there. "Can I sit?" The question came out small. Marco waited 1 second, then made room without looking at her. Their silence was heavy, full of things neither had said yet. Sophia breathed in deep, the way a person does when they decide to stop protecting themselves. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong." Marco let out a short, bitter laugh. "Wrong or dishonest?" Sophia felt the bottom drop out of her chest. But she didn't run. "I hid things. I didn't plan to use you. I needed to know if someone could like me without seeing what I have." Marco turned his face, finally looking at her directly. "And you decided I didn't deserve the truth to get there." The words cut more than any shouting could. Sophia tried to explain, without it sounding like an excuse. "In my life, everyone asks what's in it for them before they help. Everyone wants a piece, a favor, a name, an open door. When you pulled over in that truck and gave me a ride, I froze, because it was the first time in a long time someone was just human with me. No conditions." She swallowed hard, her eyes filling. "I was afraid to lose that. Afraid that the second you knew who I was, your eyes would change. That you would start calculating. That you would become like everyone else." Marco tightened his jaw, because he could hear the pain and it was real. "But to protect that feeling, you did the dirtiest thing. You gave me a reason to doubt everything." And then he asked the question she feared most. Simple and direct, like he always was. "Why the mansion? Why buy that place in secret?" Sophia lowered her head, then lifted it again with something that looked like the first real courage she had shown since she arrived. "Because I fell in love with this town, with the way people look at each other here, the way you help each other. I wanted to stay. I wanted to build something that worked for everyone, and I wanted to help, without it looking like I was buying love." She held his eyes. "And also because I heard you talk about your dream, the training center. You said it like it was impossible. And all I could think was, it's not impossible, not for us." Marco stayed quiet, taking it in. The anger didn't disappear, but it started mixing with something else, confusion. Because what she said didn't sound like a game. It sounded like someone trying to do the right thing the wrong way. The next day, Sophia stopped hiding. She asked Senora Rosa to call as many people as possible to the plaza. No ceremony, no production, just truth. The town showed up heavy, some out of curiosity, some with arms crossed, some with real warmth. Sophia stood up, no heels, no performance, and looked at the faces that had been her first home in years. I'm going to say something I should have said from the first day. The murmur went still. "Yes, I have money. A lot of it. And that's why I ran." Another murmur ran through the crowd, but she kept going, because money made it so I never knew if people were with me or with what I represent. Here, Senora Rosa hugged me without knowing anything. Don Ernesto told me his stories without asking for anything back. The kids grabbed my hand just to play, and I was afraid. This is the kind of story we tell on Addictive Stories. Real, raw, and unforgettable. Sophia breathed deep, looking at the ground for 1 second before lifting her eyes again. "I hid who I was, and that hurt good people, especially Marco. So I'm asking for forgiveness. No excuses. I was wrong." When she finished, the plaza held a tight silence, until someone from the back called out, "What do you want from us?" Sophia answered without a pause. "Nothing. I didn't come to buy this town. I came to try to be a person. I just want a chance to prove I'm not playing games here." It was Senora Rosa who broke the tension. She stepped forward, snapped her dish towel on her shoulder the way she always did, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, This girl washed dishes in my cafe. She carried the heavy flour bags. She cried in the bathroom when she thought nobody was looking. If that was acting, she deserved an award. Old Don Ernesto lifted his cane and added, "Money doesn't make anybody sit and listen to an old man's story for hours." She listened. Slowly, the mood changed, not to instant forgiveness, but to something open. The truth was finally on the table. Marco had watched the whole scene from the edge of the plaza, without moving. Every word Sophia said pulled at something inside him. He left before it ended, walking fast, not looking back. But his mind was fighting itself. What if she's telling the truth? What if I'm punishing someone who has already been punished enough? And right behind that thought came another, harder one. What if this is just one more pretty version of the story, designed to pull you back in? He walked to the shop, moved tools around without reason, the way a man does when he is trying to fix something that isn't made of metal. And for the first time, he saw it clearly. Trust doesn't rebuild itself in one conversation. It rebuilds itself in time, and in actions that can hold the weight of reality. The next morning, Marco's mother called him into the kitchen the way mothers do when they know their son is broken, but won't say it out loud. She poured coffee without asking if he wanted any. "I saw you leave the plaza," she said, and I saw her face when she asked for forgiveness. Marco stayed quiet, staring at the table. She continued, lower. "Son, I don't like dishonesty, but I also know desperation when I see it. That girl, she doesn't have the look of someone putting on a show." Marco let out a heavy breath. "Mom, it's not just a secret. It's the size of her world. The difference between us. Thinking that any day she might get tired of all this and disappear. And I'm the one left holding my heart in my hands." His mother gripped her coffee mug firmly and said something simple but strong. "You have the right to be afraid. Just don't let fear make every decision for you." Meanwhile, Sophia started acting the only way she knew how, not by hiding again, but by doing something that could not be undone. She called her lawyers, requested documents, asked for numbers, not to run away, but to commit. If she wanted to prove this wasn't a passing fancy, she had to do something irreversible, something that said, "I am not going anywhere." While she signed papers late that night, she whispered to herself, "This is not about convincing Marco with money. It's about showing through actions that I'm not playing with anything here. Not the town. Not him." Sophia called an open meeting in the plaza, late afternoon when the whole town passed through. No announcement online, no pretty speech prepared. Just her standing there, hair in a messy bun, voice shaking on the inside, facing people who used to call her by name and now looked at her like a stranger. "I'm going to tell the whole truth," she started, and the noise dropped. "Yes, I bought the mansion. Yes, I have money. Yes, I hid it, not to fool you, but because I needed to live a little without being treated like a walking checkbook." She breathed and looked at each face. "Even so, I was wrong. I built real feelings on top of what I left out. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I hurt the trust of this whole town. And I'm sorry. No justification. Just sorry." Marco was there, half hidden at the back. He had come because his mother pushed him, because Senora Rosa pushed him, because even old Don Ernesto told him that a stubborn man loses good things for the sake of pride. And when Sophia said his name, not like a romantic confession, but like a genuine apology, he felt his chest tighten in a way he could not push away. I met a man who stopped an old truck in the middle of nowhere and treated me like a person. I wanted to be loved for that, and I ruined the path by trying to control my fear. The murmur in the plaza became a sea of reactions, but nobody could say she wasn't being brave. Then she did something nobody expected. She pulled a thick folder from her bag and held it up. "I signed today the creation of a permanent fund for this region. 60% of what I have will be locked into it. This is not a donation for a nice photo. This is not a promise. It is a registered document. It cannot be undone." A man in the crowd called out, "Why would you do that?" Sophia answered without softening it, "Because I don't want to buy acceptance. I want to build something that stays, even if you never like me again. Because I learned here that dignity is worth more than luxury. And because I cannot ask for trust if I'm not putting something real on the line." The plaza went still, and it was Senora Rosa who broke it. She stepped forward, snapped her towel on her shoulder, and said out loud, "This girl worked in my cafe like nobody else." If that was theater, it was the best theater I've ever seen. Don Ernesto added from his chair, "She sat and listened to me for hours. Rich or poor, almost nobody does that." People began to speak, some agreeing, some saying they still needed time. But something had shifted. The truth was out, and even the most suspicious people respected a woman who could stand up and face her own mistake. Marco did not applaud, did not smile, did not run to her. He stood still because it wasn't simple. He was hurt, but he was not blind. What Sophia had done that afternoon was not an easy fix. It was a decision that touched the future of everyone there. After the plaza emptied, Marco walked to the hill, the place he always went when the world got too loud. And as if life liked to put people back at the same point, Sophia was already there, sitting on the grass, looking at the town lights below. When he arrived, she didn't pretend to be surprised. She just said quietly, "I didn't do this to buy you back." He answered the most honest way he could. "I know, and that's what leaves me with no argument." Sophia let out a short laugh without happiness. "I wanted to be strong from the beginning, but I was a coward. I put you in the role of being different, without giving you the right to actually be different." Marco breathed deep, feeling the anger turn into tiredness. "What hurt me most wasn't you having money, Sophia. It was you deciding I didn't deserve the truth, like I was too fragile to handle all of you." A tear came down without drama. "I understand, and if you say it's over, I will accept it. But I needed to stop living like half a person." He stayed quiet for a long time, choosing each word with care. "I don't know if I can go back to how it was before, because before, I believed without thinking. Now I'm going to need time. And action, not promises." Sophia wiped her face and said, "Then I'll give you time and action. Complete transparency. Everything I do will be clear, recorded, no secrets." Marco let out a slow breath. "And one more thing. If you want to stay here for real, stop trying to do everything alone. Here, when a house falls, the whole town gets on the roof together. You don't have to prove yourself by yourself." In the weeks that followed, the mansion stopped being the rich woman's castle and started becoming a real project. Rooms turning into workshops, the main hall opening into a classroom space, the gardens unlocking for community events. And Marco, without officially declaring anything with Sophia, was called in to give his opinion, not as an employee, as someone who understood the real life of that town. "If you want a training center, start with the basics," he said in one simple meeting. "Good tools, safety equipment, a good teacher, and a student who is hungry to learn." Sophia wrote everything down without interrupting, without trying to take over. That was when Marco noticed. She was learning not to control things out of fear. One evening, Marco's mother was standing at the door of the house, looking at the roof. "Solid now. Fixed right." "She's not perfect," his mother said. Marco answered without turning around, "Nobody is." "Then don't use her mistake as an excuse to run from something that might be good." It was with that sentence still hammering in his head that Marco walked into Senora Rosa's cafe one afternoon, where Sophia was helping clean tables, the same as she always had. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and said it plain, "I don't forgive you all at once, but I don't want to lose you out of pride." Sophia closed her eyes for 1 second, like she was holding her heart in both hands. "I accept that," she said. "Step by step, no secrets. Welcome to Addictive Stories, where real people, real love, and real mistakes make the best kind of story." Months passed. The community center was taking shape the way good things do, slowly, with the hands of many people. Young men came to learn how to fix engines under Marco's instruction. Women from the neighborhood signed up for the first computer class. Older residents helped plan the garden that would border the entrance. Sophia was not standing at the front of all of it. She was at the side, helping carry, helping listen, asking before deciding. And Marco, who had spent weeks keeping that invisible wall between them, found the wall thinning on its own, not because of any grand gesture, but because of the Tuesdays she helped a teenage boy reattach a carburetor without making him feel small. The Fridays she sat with Diego for an hour, helping him with a school project, without being asked. The small things, the quiet things, the things that don't get photographed. Diego, for his part, had never stopped looking for her. Children have a clear eye for people who are real. He called her Miss Sophia with a casualness that said she had already been accepted in the only court that mattered. The court of the 7-year-old who had known loss and still chose to trust. One Saturday morning, Marco and Sophia found themselves side by side at the community garden, planting tomatoes in the hard Texas earth. They worked without talking for a long time. Then Marco said, without looking up from the dirt, "I'm not afraid of your money anymore." Sophia kept her hands moving. "What are you afraid of?" He paused. "That one day this town won't feel like enough. That you'll want more than this." Sophia sat back on her heels and looked at him, not with hurt, but with something steady. "Marco, I left a life where I had everything and felt nothing. I came here with one backpack and a story I was afraid to tell. And the best thing that happened to me was that old truck pulling over." He finally looked at her. "This is enough for me," she said. "More than enough. I'm not leaving." He held her eyes for a long moment, then nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods when he believes something, but still needs time to let it settle into his bones. That afternoon, Diego ran across the community center courtyard with 2 other kids, laughing in that loud, unself-conscious way that only children know how to do. Marco watched him from the shade of the doorway. Sophia stood beside Marco. "He's happy," she said. "Yeah," Marco said. "He is." The air between them was different now. Not fixed. Things broken and rebuilt are never exactly the same as before, but different in a way that was honest. The kind of closeness that knows what it survived to get there. Marco's mother had started inviting Sophia to Sunday dinner without making a production of it. Just a text. "Dinner at 7. Come if you want." Sophia always came. She always brought something, not to impress, just because that was how she had learned people here showed up. She was learning the language of this town, not with money, with presence, and slowly, without a formal announcement, she stopped being the heiress in people's minds. She became Sophia. Diego's Miss Sophia. Marco's Sophia, the woman who showed up in the storm. The old Montoya mansion, renamed quietly, without a ceremony, as the Centro Comunitario Valle Verde, opened its main doors on a warm Saturday in October. The whole town came. Young people stood in line to register for classes. Mothers cried a little at the entrance, the way mothers do when they see something built for their children. Old Don Ernesto sat in the front row in his good shirt and his cane across his knees, looking like a man who expected the world to get things right eventually. The men from the city, the ones who had come with their pressed suits and their looks of contempt, had long since gone back where they came from. What Sophia had built here could not be argued away, undone, or dismissed. It was made of too many real hands. Sophia stood at the small stage that had been set up in the courtyard. No prepared speech. No podium. Just her voice. "I came here running for my life. Along the way, I found a place that forced me to face who I am. Today I don't want to run anymore. I want to build." She stepped down from the stage. Marco was waiting near the gate. No ring. No dramatic music. He just extended his hand. She took it, and in that one gesture, everyone present understood something simple and true. The bridge between 2 different worlds is not built with luxury. It is built with truth, told again and again every single day. Weeks after the opening, life in Valle Verde had a different rhythm, a fuller one. The training center ran 3 programs. Automotive mechanics led by Marco, basic electrical work taught by a retired engineer named Don Rubin, and a woodworking class that had a waiting list of 22 students before it even started. Sophia managed the administrative side, budgets, schedules, contact with the county, but she did it from a small office inside the center, not from a distance. People could walk in and talk to her. She preferred it that way. Diego started spending weekend mornings at the shop with his father. Marco had begun teaching him the names of tools, wrench, socket, torque, in both English and Spanish, the way his own father had taught him. One Saturday, Diego handed Marco a 3/8 ratchet before Marco even asked for it. Marco looked at his son with quiet pride. How did you know that's what I needed? Diego shrugged with the confidence of a 7-year-old who has been paying attention. Miss Sophia told me to watch what people do, not just what they say. Marco wiped his hands on a shop rag and looked out the bay door toward the center across the lot, where Sophia was probably at her desk right now, going through something that would make her rub her forehead and then fix it anyway. He smiled, not the polite smile, the real one. The boy had learned something good from her. The town had too. And Marco, who had been afraid to trust again after a long stretch of being a man alone, was learning that trust doesn't announce itself. It grows like a plant in hard soil, slow, quiet, and stronger than it looks. One evening in November, Marco and Sophia sat on the hill one more time. The same hill, the same view. The town below them was lit up. The cafe, the shop, the center, the houses full of people who knew each other. Do you remember the first time we came up here? Sophia asked. You stared at the mansion too long, Marco said. She laughed. I was terrified you were going to figure it out. I almost did. You're a smart man. I'm a slow man, he said. But I get there. They sat quietly for a while. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Then Marco said, not dramatically, just true. I'm glad I pulled over. Sophia turned to look at him. I'm glad I was walking that road. You planned that too? He asked, half smiling. No, she said. That part was real from the beginning. The heat, the exhaustion, the dirt road, all real. I had no idea your house was next to that mansion. I had no idea you existed. And if you had known, he asked. She thought about it. I don't know. Maybe I would have been more afraid. Maybe I would have avoided you. Good thing you didn't know then. Good thing you stopped. The hill was quiet. The town was full. And two people who had come to that view from very different roads sat in the same place, looking at the same lights. Not because life had been easy, but because they had both chosen when it counted most to stay. By December, the community center had hosted its first graduation ceremony. 14 young men and women completing the first cycle of the automotive training program. Marco stood at the front of the room in a clean button-down shirt, the kind he wore for things that mattered. He handed out each certificate personally, shook each hand, said each name with care. Among the graduates was a 19-year-old named Luis, the youngest, the one who had almost dropped out in week 3 because he didn't think he was smart enough. Marco had stayed late with him 4 nights in a row, going over the same diagrams until the boy's eyes finally lit up. When Luis walked across that small stage, his mother, standing along the wall, cried without embarrassing herself about it. Sophia watched in the side of the room, a paper cup of coffee in her hands, wearing the same kind of plain clothes she had walked into this town in months ago, on that dirt road, in that heavy summer heat. She was not the center of the room. She didn't need to be. After the ceremony, Senora Rosa found her near the refreshment table and squeezed her arm without saying much. Just a squeeze, the kind that says, I see you without making a show of it. Don Ernesto, leaning on his cane, made his way over and said simply, You did good, girl. Sophia nodded. She didn't correct him. She didn't say the center was built by everyone, or that she was just part of it. She just said, Thank you, Don Ernesto. Sometimes the right answer is simple. On the last night of the year, the community center held an open gathering. Music, tamales, paper lanterns in the courtyard. Children running in every direction. Marco and Sophia stood near the edge of the courtyard, watching Diego chase another kid around a fountain that had been restored from the old mansion garden. Marco had his hands in his pockets. Sophia had a shawl around her shoulders. The air was cool and the lanterns were warm. 1 year ago tonight, Sophia said, I was at a hotel in the city, having dinner alone, trying to decide which life I was going to choose. And you chose a dirt road in Texas, Marco said. I chose a dirt road in Texas. He looked at her. No regrets. None, she said. No pause, no performance. Just true. Diego ran up between them, out of breath, face red, eyes shining. Dad, can Miss Sophia come to breakfast tomorrow? Marco looked at Sophia. She looked at Marco. That's up to Miss Sophia, Marco said. Sophia crouched down to Diego's level. I'll be there. Diego ran back to his friends, satisfied, the way children are when the world makes sense. Marco and Sophia stayed where they were, watching the lanterns rise slowly into the night sky above Valle Verde, carrying light upward in the dark. No grand decorations. No finale speech. Just two people who had been honest enough to stay, and a town that had learned that what holds people together is not money, not perfection, not a clean history. It is a choice to keep showing up, and that from the very first ride in an old truck to this quiet courtyard on the last night of the year was the only thing that had ever been real between them.